Welcome, everybody, to the Voice of the Coalition, the official podcast of the Insurance Marketing Coalition. I'm Bill DeCourcy, and I'm joined, as always, by my friend and co-host, Chris Michelson. And thank you, everybody, for coming along on this journey with us. We invite you, as you're listening along, to drop your comments in the chat. We are going to bring those up during our discussion and address any questions or insights that you may have. And spend some time addressing your questions. Chris, over the past few years, we've watched insurance marketing evolve pretty rapidly. We've seen more regulation, we've seen more specialization, we've seen more technology and more sophistication across every part of the distribution chain. And I think you and I would agree that in many ways, each individual part of that chain has become very good at what it does. But as we've discussed, at the same time, there's an underlying question that's surfacing more and more. And that's who actually owns the beneficiary experience from beginning to end.
That's right. I mean, if you look at any individual participant in the system, right, whether it's lead vendors, FMOs, call centers, carriers, technology partners, everybody is performing in their role. They're focused on hitting their metrics. They're focused on delivering results. But when you zoom out and you look at the full journey from the beneficiary's perspective, it's definitely fragmented. And I think that raises critical leadership questions, right? Like, is the system optimized for the success of each participant, like the groups in it? Or is it designed for the success of the beneficiary? And probably argue both ways. But more importantly, right, who's responsible for making sure that those two things stay aligned?
Yeah. And that's what makes today's conversation so important. And the person in the middle of our screen here is going to be helping us with that conversation, our guest today, Rachel Honoway, the Vice President of the Insurance Marketing Coalition. Rachel works closely with leaders across carriers, FMOs, TPMOs, call centers, technology providers, basically every piece of the insurance distribution and marketing space. And what she's been helping to articulate as a thought leader is what she describes as a growing leadership vacuum across the distribution chain. Rachel, we're really glad to have you with us here today.
Thank you very much for having me. You guys know I really love talking about leadership in general, and I really welcome talking about humans today when everybody's talking about AI all the time. So this is nice to be talking about the human element and all of the decisions that we're still making today.
Well, you've taught us both so much, and I know that the audience here is anxious to hear your perspective on those things. So to start off, when you use the term leadership vacuum, which is a term that you've used pretty often in our private conversation, what does that mean to you in the context of insurance marketing today?
Yeah, well, I think you guys kind of touched on this already, but it's that idea that each of us is so siloed. I'm working with leaders in the lead vendor space and at the carrier level, and everybody's doing their job. They're all working really hard to do their part of the distribution chain, but then they're passing it on to the next level, or they're grabbing it from the level above them, and nobody is responsible for the entire chain. So at some point, nobody's looking at everything across the board. I think we're all assuming that that's what CMS is supposed to do. But even CMS, we see in their regs and in their recommendations that they're sort of pointing the finger back at all of us, like, you guys take care of this, right? So it just seems like we're all looking around thinking, who's really responsible at the end of the day? And it's a big question across the board.
Yeah.
So, Rachel, do you feel like it's more structural from the sound of it versus like individuals not necessarily doing their job, right? Like, so if everyone's optimizing their own piece, but nobody owns that full system together, who do you think slots into that? Like, who has to step up, maybe?
Yeah, that's a really, really tough question. Chris, you've heard me say this so many times. It always comes down to incentives. When you look at anything, any business model, any commission structure, anything at all, it's the incentives. And the incentive here, this entire industry is based on incentives that were built to make this industry work exactly the way that it's working. So everybody is doing their job. They're doing exactly what they're incentivized to do. Nobody's doing anything maliciously. And I'm using that, term broadly. Of course, there are bad players out there, and we're at the coalition here working really hard to keep those players out of the industry. But we're all working to do things the right way, but we all kind of only have our piece of the pie, our piece of the chain that we're working within, because that's all we're responsible for, and that's all we can get paid for. That's how the incentives are set up.
Yeah, the layperson, amateur economist in me will say exactly that. Incentives always explain behavior, and that's the heart of the issue. Lead vendors are optimizing for leads. FMOs are optimizing for distribution. Carriers are optimizing for enrollment. Call centers optimize for conversion. But finding who is explicitly accountable to what happens to the beneficiary, which should be at the heart of everything we think about across the entire lifestyle, that there is a vacuum there, that you've specifically identified. I think all of us have intuitively known it's there, but you're putting it on the forefront and saying, how are we going to solve for this? One thing that I would say in terms of the incentives piece that you talk about is there are significant pressures that are driving this, right? I mean, what are the pressures that you're seeing executive leaders face right now? And how is that incentivizing them to make the decisions that they're making? And how do we cure that?
Yeah, yeah. They have a lot of pressures. So the leaders that I'm working with, it's seasonal. I
Mhm.
think you guys know this, right? The insurance game is seasonal. So I see them going through different pressures. I'm waiting. The next season's going to start again, where the regulatory pressures are going to be on. They're reading the new regs that are coming out and thinking, okay, how do we get all of our marketing creative ready for next AEP and OEP? And how are we going to do this in a world where CMS and the laws barely know that digital marketing exists? They, they barely touch on that. But most of our leads are coming from Google and Facebook and all of these ad networks and retargeting. Retargeting isn't even contemplated in the CMS regs, right? But we know as marketers, that's one of the biggest things that we use to get people to make our phones ring and to come in and start the conversations with us. So that's one of the biggest things that our leaders are trying to uh, balance right now. They need to be able to use these new technologies in these creative ways of bringing beneficiaries in and starting those conversations and getting information and education out to the beneficiary, but they're not sure if they're allowed to.
Mm.
And God forbid they ask. God forbid you ask, are we allowed to do this? Because then, oh, no, no, you can't do it. Right? Don't ask. That's what we tell them. Don't ask.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's a tough one. I don't know. Regulation, creativity, those two are really, really big. Chris, you look like I
How
heard
much
you.
do we? No, I'm thinking through this because it's like, you're right. Like, think about it from like a small call center perspective.
Mhm.
You've got a group that is, and it's different types of pressures, right? The small agency is out there like trying to make it week to week, just floating paycheck to paycheck to pay for media, to make sure that they're getting their compliance checks coming, or their commission checks coming. They're definitely not getting a check from compliance. It's the opposite. Their commission checks to come in. And then you've got these major agencies that are just trying to hit numbers to report up to the board. They're like, hey, we didn't just take your money. Like, we are growing, and we're growing the right way.
Yeah.
And then you start to peel back the layers of the onion a little bit, and it's like, what the heck is actually going on here, right? And
Yeah.
Rachel, one of the things that I appreciate about you the most is since I've known you now for the last, like, whatever it's been, 3-4 years or whatnot, like, you've always maintained the same central focus that, like, good leadership breeds good culture, breeds positive movement, and positive movement in an ethical way. When that starts to break down, how does the fragmentation of that break show up to like the beneficiary experience, right? So it's so if you have a TPMO that qualifies a lead properly, right, and a call center that conducts the correct enrollment, and then that process does everything correctly, but then the product itself falls apart, right? Or the carrier isn't, living up to their standards, or there's a technology issue on the, the tracking side. I mean, there's a million things that can go up. I think we often forget how much of this industry is behind the curtain. We always focus, like as the Insurance Marketing Coalition, we focus on in front of the curtain, right? So like theoretically, even if we do everything right on the front and everything falls apart behind the curtain, like what can good leaders do to make sure they're keeping the behind the curtain stuff that they're out of control of most of the time? It doesn't break all their processes.
That's a really great question.
That is a loaded question.
I'm out. I'm 10 minutes in. I feel like I've done my job for the day. It's time for a nap. So
no, it's a great question. And I mean, you're hitting on exactly what we're talking about, right? Somebody at the very beginning can do their absolute best. That lead generation company can go out there. They can have the most compliant piece of marketing out there in the market, getting the best leads in the door. And we all know, well, I say all of us, most of us on this call know what it takes to actually get that piece of marketing approved before it even gets out there. So they've done a lot of work just to get that piece. So that piece is out there. It makes the phone ring. Making the phone ring is a big deal. You know what that takes, right? That phone is ringing. The recorder is on. The agent is ready. That agent is going to walk the person through all of their options. That means that agent has been trained on lots of different plans that are available. They've gone through their certification for this plan year to make sure that they can continue to sell in the states in which they can sell. So there's a lot that's gone into that specific agent. So there's a ton that has gone in just for that one simple phone call, right? So all of that goes right. That agent has a wonderful, wonderful phone call with that beneficiary. They walk them through all their options. They find a plan that's perfect for them. They get them into this plan. It covers their doctor, their current doctor. Great. They don't even have to change doctors. They're going to save a couple of dollars a year. They find out their medications are covered with this plan. Heck, they're going to get dental visits with this, maybe even some hearing and vision coverage. This is a wonderful plan for this beneficiary. They get all the way through, and it gets sent over to the carrier. And let's say even everything goes perfect at carrier, Chris, right? Carrier does everything they're supposed to do, and the envelope gets lost in the mail, right? Let's just pretend good old post office loses the envelope, and that envelope with their card ends up in their neighbor's mailbox, and the neighbor's like, whatever, throws it away because it's not theirs. So everything went absolutely the way it was supposed to. What's going to happen to that beneficiary? Who are they mad at? That beneficiary is pissed at that agent because that agent lied to them, didn't they?
Yeah.
That agent lied. So that beneficiary is going to call CMS. They're going to call, right? They're going to start this whole line of complaints about being lied to. It's going to call into question that marketing material, which means that lead vendor is going to get called into question. That agent is going to get, dinged in some way or another. They're going to get that commission taken away, right? All of these pieces are going to start to fall apart. And really, at the end of the day, it was the post office that messed up. And it was whatever, simple mistake, right? Nothing in that chain went wrong, but all of these dings, they were all the wrong thing. All of the wrong things got marked wrong, right? All of the wrong things got graded Fs when they were A pluses. They were all A pluses. They all got de-incentivized. That's what's wrong with this. The wrong things are getting dinged.
Or like even worse, they like call the carrier, right? And sit on hold for an hour. Like dinging CMS is one thing because like who knows if they're even going to respond to it, right? I mean, like truly. But they, God forbid, they call the carrier and raise a big enough stink and it goes there. And now the carrier is like involved and asking every question. And it's like, ask a carrier the question. If CMS called you tomorrow with a complaint, how long would it take you to find out what actually happened to that customer? Like, call a distributor and say, I need to see the creative that this call came in on and see how long it takes. I mean, it's good for the carrier. It could take months to get, right? Like there's fractured processes.
And would they even really ever get to the truth of it?
Right.
I mean,
that Bill.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. Great question.
If I look at this through the lens a lot of times of the agent, right? The agents who are the ones that are out there and interacting with beneficiaries and doing the very, very hard frontline work that keeps all of us employed. And, they're motivated. The best agents are motivated by a sense of service and wanting to help people. And a lot of what you're talking about right here puts them on the defensive. And it's not a great place to be, especially if you're the 99% of the agents out there that are genuinely good faith efforts, making good faith efforts to do things the right way. When you get one of these, these complaints and you have to respond defensively and audit everything. I mean, that's where technology can really be your friend. But I mean, it's got to be discouraging.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. Bill, I don't know if I've met an agent yet who wouldn't just lay down for a beneficiary. I've worked in the call center environment. I've been in the FMOs now and gone through some of their agencies. Just these agents, they do this for the beneficiary. Of course, a lot of them like the sales aspect of it. They are salespeople, but let's be honest. You can make a lot more money doing sales in a lot of different industries. You don't become a health insurance salesperson because you're a super commission driven human being. That's not it. You go into other industries. You become a health insurance salesperson because you really want to help people. So yes, absolutely. These people, I think, take on a lot of personal responsibility, and they end up getting a lot of, they get a lot of shit dumped on them that they don't deserve.
Yeah, absolutely do. I'm going to give a shout out right now. I just have to do this. There's an agent who works with Precision Senior Marketing, which, I'll just give a disclaimer. That is an AmeriLife associated agency. His name is Adrian. He works in San Antonio. I called him the other day to bounce some ideas off him because he's really quite brilliant when it comes to advising me on our marketing efforts. He couldn't talk because he was taking one of his beneficiaries to a doctor's appointment on his own time. I mean, that's the kind of person who makes it in this industry. So we do appreciate all of our agents out there very much. Shout out to Adrian in San Antonio for all that you do for the people in that community. So Chris, I think you had a question.
Bill, we got to build like some sort of like confetti thing when we do like celebratory shout outs like that. You're the creative guy. You gotta give me a button. I can just pop the balloons.
I think there's probably something in here that while you're talking, I can find and get some fun with. Let's see here.
Don't give me access to that.
You, Chris, I know that you had a question, and while I'm searching through the creative assets that my team has given me, let's see what I can do here.
Right on. Like I want to keep in tune with what Rachel just said because it's such a good point, and I don't want to deviate from that because everything can go right, and then the post office drops the ball, but the agent's the one that's getting slapped on the wrist, like they did something wrong. They didn't do anything wrong. So you've been an executive in the space. You've built startups. You've had multiple exits. You're on your own. You're doing this amazing coaching thing. You and I had like a 45-minute conversation yesterday. I was just like, there's no one better for this, right? So like when you're talking to these leaders and they come to you and they're talking about these like fractured systems that are completely out of their control, like let's just call it what it is. You cannot predict for the envelope to fall out of the postman's bag while they're walking through the neighborhood. How how many times do you hear a leader say things like, yeah, we don't really worry about that because that's out of my scope, right? Or that's a downstream problem. It's not something we have to focus on. And when you see leaders that talk like that, do you often, I mean, I'm assuming the answer is yes, but how many other fractures do you see in their business model, right?
Yeah. Well, Chris, you know me well enough to know that when I talk to leaders like that, I don't end up end up working with them very long. So, yeah, if that's truly where they're coming from, then that tells me that they're in it for a couple of quarters. They're milking it for what it is, and they're looking to get out quickly. And quite honestly, I'm here in the Insurance Marketing Coalition, and I'm here to build an incredibly stable industry that's built on ethics, and that's not who I'm here for. So those kinds of leaders, they don't stick around long. They're not here long. But what I do hear more of from the strong leaders are that, yes, those kinds of things are happening upstream and downstream, and they're more bothered by the fact that they can't influence it. And that they're not in control of more pieces. And they're trying to figure out, how do I influence that? How do I work with more partners that have the same sort of ethics that I do? How do I have partnerships? How do I ensure that my lead vendors are doing the things they're telling me to do? Bill just said it kind of as an aside, but like, you're going to ask for their marketing piece. How do you know that it really was the marketing piece that was out there, right? Yeah, we want to know, was it really the marketing piece? We want to have that trust, but we kind of also want to have that assurance that it really was. So yes, the true leaders, the people that are in these different spots, they want to know that they're getting leads from the right places, and they want to know that they're passing on their beneficiaries to the next one in line who's going to take really good care of them. They want to work with technology partners who are going to keep the beneficiaries' information safe, who are going to connect people in the right way. They're not just in it for the next quarter to hurry up and make a buck and get out. So that's what I'm hearing more of. And those are the people that I want to roll up my sleeves and get in and work with.
Rachel, we do have some additional questions for you, but I want to bring up a comment that was dropped in the chat. I did do some investigation, by the way. The only thing my team has given me access to when it comes to celebratory things is something called the dancing skeleton or the beach snowman. So I'm not sure how appropriate those would be, but apparently that's the best that I can do with short notice, is to have a beach snowman show up every time we want to celebrate something.
Is it just a pineapple? Is that just a pineapple on the sand?
I don't know. I'll have a discussion with them a little later on about maybe adding in some better clip art as we go forward and do these.
And are those shorts or underwear? Like, I don't.
Yeah. Listen, at the IMC, we celebrate with pineapple sand castles with sunglasses on. That's how we say you've done a good job.
This place is incorporated in Florida. What do you want me to do, guys? This is cultural. I'm doing the best I can. So Farzine asked a question for Rachel and team. What metrics do you rely on to spot leadership gaps early? Complaint signals, QA trends, transfer rates, cancellations, rapid disenrollment. Yeah, all of us love our dashboards. So when we look at our dashboard, is there something that stands out at us that says, hey, you may have a systemic problem when it comes to a leadership gap manifesting itself in numbers? What do you think?
Farzine's such a goat, man. He always has the good questions, man. I love it. Thanks, Farzine. That's a good one.
I do. He is the best. Yes. And Bill, I think you said it right too. Just saying this, like, dashboards, everybody's addicted to their dashboards and their KPIs. But just like the way that Farzine has this listed out here, these are all separate metrics, right? What I like to look at is, if everybody is looking at these separate metrics, what is the picture it's telling us holistically? If one person's looking at complaint signals and somebody else has QA trends and somebody else has transfer rates, if each department or each leader has their own metric and they're all showing green lights, who cares? That doesn't tell you anything. What is the whole story? So if all of these metrics can work together to tell you a whole story, that's what you want to know. What are, signal is actually the best word that Farzine has on here. What is it signaling? If it's just giving you a number and your number's like, oh, that's a number we decided at some point was a good number. What now? What is it telling you? What is it signaling?
Right. What's the insight that you can derive from that? That's the key question. All right. Last follow-up on the Pineapple Santa. Aaron Perry, national champion lineman from the Ohio State Buckeyes and renowned lawyer in this space, says that Santa does not look like that in Ohio. Lulz. And I know. Rachel, for those of you who don't know, lives in the great state of Michigan, which is also my home state. I have the advantage of having attended the Michigan State University, which means that I can be friends with Aaron a lot more easily than I can be friends with Rachel. But we've seemed to overcome that. All right. So we've talked about KPIs. We've talked about incentivization of behavior. Chris, you had some additional questions about, front-loading marketing during enrollment periods, optimizing the system to drive immediate results, even when things can get, I don't want to say catastrophic downstream, but what are your thoughts on the way that we structure things to be so intense at the beginning and how that impacts things?
I think it just goes back to controlling what you can control, right? Like Rachel kind of touched on that earlier. And I just feel like people always focus on that. But look, the point of this conversation is the vacuum, right? And so I think in my head, I just think about, vacuums suck. What sucks about our space? What sucks about our space is that it's totally fragmented. The front end of the beneficiary experience and the back end of the beneficiary experience are completely separated. To a lot of groups' credits that I see out there, there are a lot more groups aligning with their, building their own TPAs or becoming, aligning with TPAs to do their own card sourcing and send their own cards and understanding that part out. I've seen it a lot. I don't know that I have another question about that as much as it's just how, and this is probably for both of you and everybody watching too, right? What can we do? I feel like we're all leaders in the IMC, right? We're all taking a stand, kind of putting our necks out there. How do the two of you feel about joining the front and the back end of the space and creating less of that dissonance between the two in order to sort of alleviate that beneficiary journey? Because it is a problem, right? It's fractured visibility, it's fractured understanding. How do you fix the fracture?
Rachel, do you want to take this one first, or do you want me to chime in on that?
Why don't you chime in? We haven't heard a lot.
I mean, my opinion is that any system is optimized when there's a balance between supply and demand. And I know that's a very simplistic way of looking at it right now, but I mean, the breaks happen because we don't have systems that can talk to one another and that can drive that continuous red thread through what Chris just described and make the system actually efficient. Now, I'm talking about an efficiency standpoint, right? But with those economic efficiencies that come with connected systems where we can understand what true demand is, and then we can optimize for, satisfying that demand on the other end, that's going to benefit us all, that we won't be overspending in certain areas of the business. But what it's also going to do, it's going to alleviate this, I call it unethical, maybe that's too strong of a word, this unethical incentive to not just generate as many customers as you can at the top end of the funnel, but to do something that's even more devious that we're starting to pick up. And Chris, this is something that you and your colleagues at Enroll Here have clued me into. This idea of taking the same people who have a propensity to respond and throwing them through the system multiple times, knowing that the result of that is going to be rapid disenrollment and the only winner being the last distribution company that signed them up. That is a I'll just say it. That's a disgusting practice that takes place in our industry right now, and it's almost impossible to suss out without the kind of connectivity that you guys are talking about.
I don't want to like jump in here and turn it all onto EH. I think EH is the first system that has like proved that theory, because we have connective tissue and it's only so many different sides. But like, Bill, you and I were talking about this back when I was at Quote. I mean, this is years ago. I was like, you guys came to me like, hey, volume is way down. I was like, dude, what we're seeing is like some bigger call centers in the space, they'll send one agency a call in Q1. They'll listen to the call. They had whatever tool that they were using to see like, oh, this is an SEP, which means they're going to qualify every quarter. So we're going to then send it to another group in Q2. We're going to send them to another group in Q3. We're going to send them to another group in Q4. And then they're getting paid for that one person 4 separate times. And listen, shame on the buyers for not having better systems to understand their enrollments and their effectuation rates and their persistency metrics. Like shame on all of us for not knowing that better, right? That goes back to our LTV conversation we had a month or two ago of the graduation of understanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look, EH gives the data to prove that that's a problem, right? But how does that tie back into advertisers are doing it because their incentives are misaligned and it's too expensive for them to drive good media. So they have to do these workarounds in order to make $1 and make a cent. Like nobody's in business to go broke, right? And so there's culpability there that they're doing the practice. There's also culpability that they have to do it. And if we could, some of it comes from people aren't getting paid enough commissions for the work that they're doing on the agency side to be able to afford what an honest and ethical lead costs, right? And so it's a foregone conclusion that people are going to play outside the bounds when playing inside the bounds means you lose on all sides.
Yep.
It goes back to incentives. We're at each part of that you're talking about, they're optimizing to get the incentives. And are they really playing outside the bounds? Is the advertiser doing anything more than just trying to get the best result? They're getting an ROI. That's their job. Right?
I had hoped that this would happen. This conversation just got very real in terms of what we are all frustrated with and what we all see in our day-to-day jobs. And I think that because we all know each other so well and we talk about this so frequently and we're so frustrated by it that it's now starting to come out. I mean, all of us think about a scenario where the incentives actually are aligned, where you have a beneficiary. I mean, let's start with the result. Starting with the result means you have a beneficiary who's in the right plan for their situation, whether it's geography or health condition or age or any of the other things that affect that particular person, and that everybody is compensated fairly for having a role in making that happen. The agent is fairly compensated for taking the time to care for that individual on their behalf. The distribution company is fairly compensated for going through the mechanics, and they are significantly complicated, those mechanics of making sure that the contracts are in place with the carriers. The carriers are incentivized and paid for providing the network of doctors and the care that person needs. And ultimately, in the case of Medicare Advantage, that the money that's coming from all of us through the government is flowing equitably to. And I didn't mention an important one. The important one is also the lead generator, the people who are generating things at the top of the funnel. They're compensated fairly for the effort that was required to get this customer into the flow. And then we are spending our tax dollars in a fair way to make sure that everybody here is doing something in a positive way to benefit the beneficiary. When I talk about this, and I feel like I'm going on a little bit of a rant, so there's a mute button there somewhere on your screen. I want to hit it. I talk to people about this and well, it sounds like you're talking about some sort of monopoly, or you're talking about some sort of, collusion within the system to make these things happen. And I always push back and say, no, there can be competition within a system like this. It's just the competition has to be rewarded not for huge and repeated volume at the top of the funnel or for, anything within this chain. It has to be that people are competing with the best technologies, the best approach to beneficiaries, the best capture mechanisms, the best retention mechanisms. And that then provides the incentive that gets you the behavior that ultimately makes sure that all of our moms and dads and anybody else we know that are on Medicare are able to go to the right doctor and get the right treatment without having to wait a hell of a long time and without being put through a ton of unnecessary hoops.
Yeah. And Bill, I completely agree with everything you're saying. At some point, somebody in the past decided that enrollments was the number, right? It's going to be easy. We'll just track the number of enrollments that happen and we can base everything on that. And since then, we've all been incentivized on everything. It starts with the enrollment and everything trickles down from there. Our whole distribution chain is all based on that. But if you look at all of the regulations that we all spend so much money on, I mean, talk about taxpayer dollars. How many taxpayer dollars that are coming from commissions into all of these parts of the distribution chain are going to backwards looking fixes to things that happen because of the problem of fighting this enrollment volume problem, right?
That's right. That's right.
We're fighting this backwards thing because we picked the wrong metric to start with. That's the wrong metric.
That's exactly, you've identified the key item here, which is that enrollment metric is what's causing all these upstream and downstream problems. And frankly, CMS is acting reactively. They're hearing things and they're making always reactively. And Chris, this is where you are most passionate about what the IMC can do, which is to work with our regulatory partners to say, you've got a rear view mirror. We've got a windshield. We see what's coming down the road and we see what the problems are. And we think that you should be addressing these things. And, Helene Fingold and other people who have worked within the commission, the coalition to get our comments out there. If you read those comments letter, they are very much forward looking in terms of, yes, we understand why you're doing this, but we recommend very strongly that you should be doing something different because the reality is the problem isn't the effect. The problem is what we're identifying here in this comment letter. And the great news is, and this is give credit to the coalition and all of its partners for this. I think it's making a difference.
You got two sides of CMS, right? You got the ACA side and the Medicare side. And I think that historically the ACA side has been more open to hearing opinion and like working cooperatively with the groups. Not that the Medicare side was like flipping up the bird or anything like that. I just think it's a much more legacy system based on, legacy rules and operating processes. But now, over the last year or two, to Bill's point, they've been way more communicative. They're showing up to events, they're coming out, they're talking, they're talking to all of us, right? And they're starting to respond. So yes, I do think that the hard work is starting to turn in to measurable wins. Like, have you guys heard about this new access model for Medicare? It's literally called Access. Shout out Gary Culp, absolute legend in our space, was, very, very high up at Cigna, is now in the government markets at Blue of California after their merger. And like, the guy is just a wealth of knowledge, been in the space for a long time. Gary Culp, good guy. Follow him on LinkedIn. I'll take the $100 tomorrow, Gary. Thanks, appreciate it. He posted something about access model for Medicare like a week ago, and I've been looking into it, and it's actually awesome. They are now going to pay through funnel of the beneficiary actually getting medical care. So they are going to be paying out on a model that like prioritizes patient outcomes versus just the enrollment process, which is awesome. Like, look, it's brand new. It's the government. It's going to suck at first. I think we all know that. But it's nice to see some of the carriers getting in there and talking about this, because it reshapes, and to Mike Lowry's point that he just brought up in the comments, right? This is going to directly affect persistency. It's going to directly affect how consumers and the agents and the agencies, I think I said this right, and the carriers are working directly with the beneficiary. Because at some point, the carriers are going to realize, holy cow, where we were getting, $300-400 a month for a consumer, I'm now getting $800 a month because this consumer is using all these other systems. They're going to the doctor, they're using a nutritionist, they're wearing a wearable so that we could measure their health ratings. And some of that's going to trickle down to the agent or an FMO. Some of the carriers aren't going to want to manage it. They're going to incentivize the FMOs, the agents, to do this type of work with the beneficiaries that they sign on, which leads to stronger persistency and a better understanding of what's going on. So it's just cool. I mean, I'm really excited to see how this plays out. It doesn't look like every carrier's gotten behind it, but like a couple of them have.
No, I look forward to learning more about that.
Yeah.
A couple of things from the chat. Michael Ross, what should real persistency be in the Medicare space? What do you guys see? Is persistency the same for all insurance or different for other instances? And then he clarifies here, depending on the line of insurance. What's been our experience here? What's our target metric? And is there even a target metric? I know that the real metrics we're seeing are changing and not exactly changing for the positive, depending on how you're selling.
I think there's a lot of nuance there that if you're not in this industry or you don't know the differences between plans and Medicare and ACA and just insurance in general, right? Like car insurance versus life insurance versus health insurance. I know coming into, Medicare, for example, I was like, insurance, whatever, you buy a policy and then you have a policy forever. Health insurance changes every year.
Mhm.
So if you're selling somebody a life insurance plan, they're going to have that plan forever. An auto insurance plan, maybe things change a little bit here and there. So you can expect that if you're going to change the plan, people might opt out of it. They might go shopping around if other plans, if there's competition in the market. When it comes to Medicare, ACA, maybe even, those plans are changing every year, and the competition in the area is changing every year. So we should expect, I don't know why these industries were built with the idea that there was going to be 3 and 4 year persistency in these plans. The LTV was going to be so long.
Right.
I think that was somehow
It used to be.
accidental. Yeah, it used to be.
It used to be that way.
Right, right. They were lucky when things started. But the fact that the plans are changing so much, that every year the carriers are going through these bid processes, they're dropping plans. We can't expect people to stay in a plan if it doesn't exist next year. So,
Right.
yeah, we need to be realistic about that. But you absolutely should be planning on putting people into a plan that they're still in 90 days from now. If you put them into a plan they're not in 90 days from now, you mess something up.
Yeah,
You've done wrong, Ron.
That's exactly right. And I think that there's two different types of persistency that we should be talking about here too, right? There's this idea of agent persistency or retention, right? Which is, if you get an ANOC or some other thing, I mean, what if your plan just doesn't even exist anymore? I mean, that's a real big thing that we're all experiencing right now. To me,
how crazy is that what we're talking about?
It's crazy. Just evaporates, right? It goes away. It was a great plan. Maybe I can't see my doctor anymore. That's where the agent has to drive the retention, right? So even if it's not the exact same plan or even the same carrier, they're saying, let me get you the closest analog that I can to this particular plan and make sure that you're taken care of. And that's where, again, without agents, this business just, I mean, it's an overly simple and obvious statement, but without agents who care, this business just absolutely crumbles.
And Bill, how often are we rewarding agents for something like that? Or are agents getting, I'm going to call it dinged again, because that's all different things, dinged for, changing somebody into a different plan? They're switching them into a different plan. Their plan went away. They can't, or their doctor's not covered anymore. Like,
how many big agencies do you guys know that are paying their agents on persistency rates? Like how many big agencies do you know are paying their agents on like renewals and giving them a renewal check every year? Or are they only incentivizing them on how many policies they enrolled, right? That's a management problem, to Rachel's point earlier.
Yeah, the
It's
leadership vacuum is there. That's one area where we could start to fill it, is start to look at those things that are, when we talk about benefiting the beneficiary, that would be a good change.
Yeah. Well, Chris,
Yeah.
that even goes into like the type of company that it is, whether it's a publicly traded company or a PE-backed company. Then you have boards. And boards, what do they like? Quarterly results. And what's better than an enrollment period that is going to take all of the revenue and just shoot that, just make that chart go up and to the right like none other. And we'll deal with all the returns and the rapid disenrollments and everything else next quarter. We can have a down quarter as long as we have a really, really high Q4 or really, really high Q1. Then we can have a down quarter. Like, right?
Yeah. And I'll say something.
Just-
I'll say something in defense of distribution companies here, and without being too on the nose about it. I couldn't find myself continuing to work for a company that did that. And I've been with AmeriLife for over 5 years. We have partners from Integrity. We have partners from other large FMOs here. I think that those companies get it. I'm going to give. There seems to be a little bit of a narrower band there of agencies who can do that, but at a certain point, there gets to be a critical mass of people who just can't live with themselves that would stop that kind of behavior en masse. So what you're saying is absolutely true. There's always the quarterly pressure. There's always the annual pressure. There's always the year over year results. But companies that are successful at scale in this business, I do think have a yin and a yang and a balance when it comes to those kind of pressures.
Yeah, Bill, and I appreciate that. I do think that there are really stand-up organizations like yours. I 100% agree with that. I am going to say you are up against it when your carriers are publicly traded companies. And
yeah.
I'm going to get hate mail and I'll take it. But that's who's driving your incentives, right?
Yeah.
Right.
That's where it's coming from.
When's the last time you saw a carrier incentivize an FMO on persistency instead of net new enrollments? Right, because their whole board is focused on what have you done for me lately. Like that executive team is going to be responsible for reporting into the shareholders on their net growth, year over year, and that's
totally. And it may not be overcomable to a complete extent.
Yeah.
But that's where the leadership vacuum becomes important. And people like Rachel and other people within the IMC, other people who we would now invite if you share a common frame of reference with us and a common ethos, to join the IMC, because this is what we're all about, to fill that leadership vacuum and to say, here's a better way to do business that's going to benefit everybody. Going back to something we talked about earlier. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I did want to say, Stephen in the comments said, can the IMC send information documents around the access model out to folks, please? Yes, Chris will do that immediately after this call. He's prepared a white paper that he's going to send out to everybody. And he's also available for speaking engagements on this particular topic. Pro bono, of course. He prefers after hours. Just let him know.
We'll give you a cell phone number. Just a second.
Oh yeah, cell phone number is going to drop that in the chat along with his personal email.
Throw the Santa up. It's time.
All right. Yes, we will endeavor. Actually, we're going to do you one better than that. What we're going to do is we're going to have a takeaway from this. We are going to bring a guest on to the IMC. Executive Director, I'm speaking to you right now. Sean, if you wouldn't mind setting up a future guest speaker for us to have at the IMC to talk about the access model that Chris spoke to. Let's get somebody on whose focus is this, and let's have them discuss this directly with the IMC. Does it sound good? Good. All right. Chris, you were going to say something before I cut you off with your cell phone number in the chat.
I'm absolutely frazzled at the moment. I've completely lost my train of thought. I think I was going to go back to the original question we were talking about, which is like what should the persistency be in the space, right? To try to give some sort of an answer. I tell everybody who's in ACA is a 12-month persistency, like max. Mm-hmm. You've got to re-enroll those people every year. You have to. You're going to lose them to somebody else if you don't, right? So a lot of touch points throughout the year, and make sure you're staying on your book or they're going to flip. And somewhere between 100% retention and 0% retention is the number that you want to invest into on your retention, right? Like, it doesn't make sense to spend $40 million to retain 100% of your business, but it might make sense to spend $500,000 to retain 65%. And so you got to kind of figure that out. On Medicare, to Rachel's point, it used to be 4.5 to 5 years. Now it's like, a 12-year sprint as well. And it has to do with plans changing. Technically, you re-enroll into original Medicare every year anyway. And theoretically, you should be able to re-enroll into your Medicare Advantage, your Part C plan every year, as long as it still freaking exists, which is insane to say. But even that's shrinking. LTVs, when these HEAP plans were coming out, the LTVs were predicted to be somewhere around $1,300, $1,400, $1,600. Now they're expected to be like $650, $750. So it's been cut in half. So you're talking about a year to 16, 18 months of persistency in Medicare is the expected rate. Do with that information what you will, Michael.
Costin has a question for us. Going back to agents and how much we appreciate them and how we can help them, where do uplines accidentally create friction for agents? And what's the simplest fix you've seen work?
Yeah. Good questions today.
Yeah, really good questions. I'll tell you what works. Communication. I mean, that sounds simple, right? That sounds too simple. But I mean, you've got to be talking to agents about you've got to be giving them a clear line of sight into exactly what their commission status is, what their contracting status is, what their payment status is. A lot of times you'll see agents, say, I'm confused by my commission statement or something like that. Like, let's just all try to make their jobs easier, because they're certainly doing a hell of a lot for us, right? So if we just look at it from an agent experience viewpoint, putting yourself in their shoes rather than the shoes of the person who has to be the intermediary between the carrier and the downline, put yourself in their shoes and try to solve those problems. I know that that's a focus for a lot of companies, my own included.
Yeah. And Bill, I'd add to that. I think communication is huge. What I've seen work too is ask the agents, what do you need? What do you need? Because, and one of the things I love with that is, and you just said it, right? You talk to agents. When you ask an agent for the first time, what do you need? Or, what can I help you with? The look that they give you is like, wait, what, me? You're asking me? Nobody asks them, which is ridiculous. For some reason, we've said, you guys are our front line. You are the largest body of this entire system, right? Agents are the largest body. They are the most, right? The most humans in this entire system. They're out there, and we're like, they'll just do what we say. We'll just send them a bunch of information, and they'll just do it. Ask them what they need. Ask them what we can help them with. Some want training. Some want a little bit of motivation. Some want us to put things together for them. Like, just ask them what they want, and they've got some really good ideas. They're the ones out there talking to the beneficiary. They have some really good information.
That's right. And we talk about filling the leadership vacuum. That's a behavior that would go a long way towards filling that vacuum. Chris, you were going to say something, buddy?
I was going to say, and some of them just want Bill DeCourcy to show up in their office in that Santa Claus outfit that we saw earlier. So it's, we've got, go ahead. I'll give you the clap back.
No, by all means, we're gonna beat Santa with the pineapple bikini. You know what? This may not be appropriate for all audiences if I'm looking at this too closely right now.
Yeah.
I guess my team got the DM, and I now have a dancing skeleton available as well. So we can just go with
even
that.
Better. We've got what the question was, about agents, and Rachel, you bring up such a good point about ask the agents what they want. Like, when you ask them, it's almost always make my life easier, right? Like, it's almost always like, I am drowning right now because my technology is crap and my processes are crap, and I'm constantly chasing my commissions because my payment schedule is crap. And look, I say this a lot. I don't mean anything derogatory by it. I was this. Insurance is A+ money for C+ students. Like almost none of us got into this space with, the intent of like, we didn't graduate from Harvard to go open an insurance agency down in Broward County, Florida. So the reality is many people kind of fall into this industry, right? It becomes this thing where it's like, you kind of figure out you can make 100 to 200 grand a year talking to friends and family, helping them and selling them products that you really believe in that actually help them. And then you learn, dude, I can make like 15 grand from teaching my boy how to do the same thing. And then I can make 5 grand per guy teaching them how to teach somebody else. And before you know it, you've got like an agency underneath you, and you have technology to manage your lead flow and technology to manage your headsets. And before you know it, you've built up this big business, and you're paying out an end for all this tech, and you're paying out for somebody to manage your books, and you're paying out for someone to manage your agents. And, it's a long-winded way of saying a lot of them just want support, right? That's right. That's, I think, why the good FMOs are good FMOs. They give good support.
Yeah, and they're owed that support.
Mm-hmm.
They really are.
100%.
I put out the last call for questions. We're almost at time. I haven't seen any come in the chat, but we'll give everybody a few seconds here. Well, like I said, this conversation got very real, very quickly, and I appreciate that. A little bit of vulnerability and pushing the boundaries of what we're comfortable saying, because it's really what's on our mind, makes for the most interesting conversations, and I hope that our audience got a ton out of it. Chris, Rachel, any final thoughts before we get back to the rest of our day? All right. Well, Rachel, thank you so much. Go ahead, Chris, please.
I was going to advocate for Rachel just as like a side note. Like, she is, I just posted about this on LinkedIn the other day. Like, another friend of mine had started up a business. I scrolled right past their post and I was like, why the hell did I do that? Like, I share so much dumb stuff on social media. Why wouldn't I share one of my dear friends like new business models? Like, Rachel, the coaching world for you, I think is amazing. If you own a business, run a business, manage a business in this industry, or probably almost any industry, she's an unbelievable resource. And she's been such a huge help on the IMC. And I just feel like she could help your team in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Rachel's a wonderful leader, and we do thank her for her leadership. And we thank her for joining us today. And to everybody who's listening, whether you joined us live or whether you're listening to this after the fact, thank you for being part of today's podcast. Please consider very strongly joining the Insurance Marketing Coalition if you feel like you would like your voice to be more directly heard in terms of shaping the future of our industry. Perhaps joining us on one of these Voice of the Coalition broadcasts in the future. We want everybody who's passionate about strengthening the industry to lock arms with us and help us move forward. Chris, thank you for being here as always. Rachel, again, thank you for your leadership. We appreciate everybody joining us today, and we will see you back here in 1 month.